When the humans first joined the wider galaxy, they didn't arrive with golden ships or glowing weapons. Their technology was solid, practical, and made for survival, not for showing off. They came from a world that had fought its way through ice ages, wars, and endless struggles. Humanity had learned one thing well. You don't need perfection to win, just persistence and creativity. But to the Zerathian Dominion, one of the great interstellar powers, humans were little more than a curiosity. The Dominion had ruled the stars for centuries. Its fleets were massive. Its weapons could cut through asteroids, and its officers believed no one could challenge their empire. When they saw how humans still used things like projectile weapons, they laughed. Across alien networks, videos and images of human weapons became jokes. Commentators from other worlds said things like, "They throw metal instead of plasma," or "Do they expect us to fear bullets?" It became a trend, a meme even, to mock Earth's so-called ancient technology. The Dominion's officers saw humans as a people stuck in the past, playing at being soldiers in a galaxy that had moved far beyond such primitive tools. But what the aliens couldn't understand was that humans didn't cling to old weapons because they were outdated. They kept them because they worked. On Earth, in deep underground bases and old shipyards orbiting the moon, human engineers were busy adapting those same old designs for something new. They knew their railguns, coil accelerators, and artillery cannons might look old-fashioned to aliens. But physics doesn't care about fashion. When you launch a heavy object fast enough, it carries energy. And that energy destroys whatever it hits, no matter how shiny or advanced the target is. Still, the mockery continued. One Dominion news channel aired a comedy segment showing humans trying to fight with sticks and stones. Even Dominion children watched cartoons where silly human characters tried to shoot rocks at warships that easily dodged them. To most of the galaxy, it was funny. To humans, it was fuel. The real test came not in words but in the black silence of space. A few years after first contact, a human mining colony was founded on a small rocky world called Vesta 9. It was rich in deuterium, an element every advanced civilization needed for starship fuel. The Dominion, however, claimed that the system fell under one of its old trade zones, something written in a treaty that humanity had never even seen. The humans on Vesta 9 refused to leave. It wasn't about pride or politics. It was home. They had built farms, stations, and families there. So when the Dominion sent a message demanding surrender, the colonists simply replied, "We don't recognize your claim." The Dominion didn't negotiate. They sent a fleet. 20 warships entered the system, their hulls glowing with the blue light of plasma engines. They were beautiful in a cold and terrible way, symbols of dominance. Inside each ship were crews that had been told this mission was a formality. They weren't going to fight, just to encourage cooperation. But in orbit above Vesta 9, a few human frigates waited, small, gray, and unimpressive compared to the Dominion's sleek cruisers. On the surface, engineers worked around the clock to activate the planetary defense grid, an old network of railguns originally built to deflect asteroids. Those guns were primitive by alien standards. They didn't use plasma. They didn't bend light. They simply hurled metal slugs at unbelievable speeds. In the Dominion command ship, officers laughed as they watched the humans preparing their defenses. One of them said, "They actually think those cannons will do something." The others chuckled. To them, it was a waste of time. Their shields had withstood plasma bursts and antimatter storms. What could a piece of metal possibly do? The Dominion admiral ordered a broadcast to the human commander. The message was calm but condescending. "Vesta 9 belongs to the Dominion. You will surrender immediately and avoid unnecessary damage." The human commander's reply came a few seconds later. His voice was steady. "This colony belongs to the people who built it. We will not abandon it." The line went silent. The Dominion admiral sighed, gave the usual order, and the fleet began descending toward orbit. From the surface of Vesta 9, the sky shimmered with the blue glow of alien engines. To the colonists below, it looked like a storm of stars. The order came from the human command post: "Prepare the batteries." The gunners didn't shout or panic. They simply went through their checklists. Power lines connected. Magnetic fields aligned. Each railgun hummed softly as energy built up inside its coils. The operators had trained for this moment, but none of them truly believed they could stop what was coming. When the Dominion ships entered firing range, their scanners picked up the charging signals from the railguns. The alien officers laughed again. One even said, "They're actually firing cannons at us." The human commander whispered one word: "Fire." The first shot left the atmosphere with a thunder that could be felt across the colony. A long streak of light cut through the dark sky. The Dominion ships registered the incoming object but didn't even bother to raise extra defenses. Their computers classified it as low-threat kinetic matter. Then the world changed. The slug hit the Dominion flagship straight through the midsection. For one instant it passed through the shields as if they weren't there. The impact transferred more energy than any plasma beam could have carried. The entire ship shuddered, and its internal systems overloaded. On the command bridge, lights went out. Gravity failed. Within seconds, the once invincible warship broke apart in silence. The other ships froze in disbelief. Their sensors had just recorded something impossible, a physical projectile bypassing their most advanced defenses. The admiral tried to shout new orders, but before he could, another railgun fired. Then another, and another. From the surface of Vesta 9, streaks of light shot upward like glowing spears, one after another. Each one found its target. The Dominion ships, built for energy warfare, had no counter for raw physical force. Their shields were tuned to absorb radiation and plasma, not to stop hypervelocity metal slugs. Within minutes, half the fleet was gone. The rest scrambled, engines burning, trying to escape the range of the guns they had mocked only hours ago. Down on the planet, no one celebrated. The gunners simply stared at their monitors, stunned by what they had done. One of them whispered, Did that really work?" The commander didn't answer. He was too busy watching the radar, making sure the survivors were leaving orbit. The battle was short, brutal, and strangely quiet. There was no grand explosion visible from space, no long chase, just a handful of shots that ended an entire fleet's arrogance. When the news reached the Dominion's capital world, the reaction was disbelief. Analysts claimed the recordings were fake. Scientists said the physics didn't make sense. A projectile can't do that. One of them insisted on a public broadcast. But the evidence kept coming. Wreckage drifting in orbit, telemetry logs, and the terrified accounts of the few surviving officers. The laughter stopped. For humans, Vesta 9 became a symbol of something far greater than victory. It was proof that being underestimated can be a weapon of its own. The old artillery, mocked by the galaxy, had done what no modern weapon could, and somewhere deep in space, on a silent defense platform orbiting Vesta 9, the railguns cooled, waiting for the next time someone forgot a simple rule: physics always wins. The silence after the Battle of Vesta 9 felt unreal. For days the colony floated in a strange calm. The skies above were clear again, but the people still looked up, half expecting to see more glowing engines or hear new warnings from orbit. Yet nothing came. The Dominion ships that had survived were gone. They had fled without another word. On the surface, the railgun crews stayed at their stations, watching the horizon and checking systems that were already perfect. It was as if no one wanted to believe what they had just done. They had defended their home against one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, with old weapons that everyone said were useless. The colony's communication lines were busy day and night. Messages flew back and forth between Vesta 9 and Earth, between engineers, commanders, and government officials. Everyone wanted to know how it happened. Was it luck? A miracle? Or had humanity just discovered something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten? When the recordings of the battle finally reached Earth, people didn't cheer right away. At first there was disbelief, grainy footage of bright streaks in the sky, then silence as massive ships simply vanished from radar. Scientists replayed the data again and again, studying the energy patterns and impact readings. The results were clear. The railguns had worked exactly as designed. The old human principle of kinetic force had proven its worth on an interstellar scale. For generations, humans had used such weapons to fight on their own planet, from simple cannons to electromagnetic accelerators. Those designs were centuries old, yes, but their principle was timeless. It wasn't about fancy energy fields or glowing plasma. It was about speed, precision, and the unstoppable force of momentum. The news spread faster than anyone expected. Across human colonies, across mining outposts and shipyards, people felt something stir inside them. Pride. Not arrogance, but a deep, quiet confidence. For the first time in history, humans had stood up to an empire that ruled the stars. And they had won. But pride has a price. While humans were celebrating, the Dominion was not sitting still. On their capital world, in vast glass towers under a blood-colored sky, their leaders met in secret. Reports from the surviving fleet captains were grim. They spoke of weapons that tore through shields like paper, of ships that died before they could even fire back. To the Dominion's rulers, it was more than defeat. It was humiliation. The Empire had always presented itself as unbeatable. To admit that a small human colony had destroyed one of their fleets would shake their reputation across the galaxy. Other species might lose fear. Trade allies might question their strength. Even their own citizens might begin to doubt. So they did what empires always do when their pride is wounded. They tried to control the story. Official Dominion broadcasts claimed that the battle at Vesta 9 had been a minor incident. They said it was caused by a reactor malfunction in one of their own ships. According to them, the humans were not involved at all. Their propaganda machines went into overdrive, flooding alien networks with the same message. Nothing special had happened. But the truth couldn't be hidden for long. Other civilizations began asking questions. They had seen the signals, the wreckage, the sudden silence from one of the Dominion's proudest fleets. Whispers began spreading. The humans did something. Soon, merchants, traders, and explorers from neutral worlds started visiting human space to see for themselves. They expected to find a species trembling in fear of retribution. Instead, they found people working quietly, rebuilding defenses, studying physics, and refining their railguns. Humanity wasn't boasting or showing off. They were preparing, right, calmly, methodically, like they always had. Meanwhile, on Vesta 9, life slowly returned to normal. The colonists rebuilt damaged power lines, cleared the debris that had fallen from orbit, and reinforced their homes. The defense teams didn't disband. They kept their posts, now more vigilant than ever. Engineers upgraded targeting systems, improved magnetic fields, and started experimenting with new alloys for the next generation of projectiles. The humans knew the Dominion would come back. It wasn't a question of if, only when. Back on Earth, government officials met in long sessions that lasted through the night. Some wanted to send diplomats to the Dominion to make peace, to show that humanity didn't seek war. Others argued that peace only came from strength, that Earth must be ready for the next attack. The decision was made quietly but firmly. Humanity would not provoke anyone, but they would never again stand unprepared. Production of railguns and coil accelerators tripled. Old factories were reopened. New defense satellites were launched into orbit, each equipped with improved kinetic weapons. It was no longer just about Vesta 9. It was about every human colony, every outpost, every ship that carried the flag of Earth. The Dominion, on the other hand, was facing its own crisis. The scientists assigned to analyze the wreckage were stunned. Their technology had evolved so far toward energy warfare that they had completely forgotten how to defend against raw impact. Their shields, designed to absorb radiation and plasma bursts, were almost useless against solid matter traveling at near relativistic speed. They couldn't understand how something so primitive could be so effective. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion's engineers were forced to study history books, human ones. But the more they studied, the more they realized that humanity had simply taken the oldest rule of war and applied it better than anyone else. Make your strength their weakness. As rumors of the battle spread, some alien scholars even began to admire humanity. They called it the Vesta Paradox, a moment when a younger species reminded the galaxy that intelligence was not the same as wisdom, and technology was not the same as strategy. Still, the Dominion couldn't let the humiliation stand. Quietly, without public announcement, they began planning a new campaign. This time, they wouldn't send a small demonstration fleet. They would bring a full armada, hundreds of ships, each upgraded, each prepared to crush the humans completely. On the surface of Vesta 9, human sensors began detecting strange activity in the outer systems, faint signals, shadows in the void, patterns that didn't belong to trading ships. Everyone knew what it meant. The Dominion was gathering, yet there was no panic. Instead, there was focus. Engineers worked through the nights, Scientists fine-tuned the railgun capacitors, stretching their range and accuracy. The people trained, repaired, and prepared quietly. The colony didn't shout its defiance. It simply refused to be afraid. One evening, as the twin suns of Vesta 9 set behind the rocky horizon, the old railguns fired test shots into space. The sound rolled across the plains like distant thunder. The colonists stopped to watch the glowing trails fade into the sky. To them, it wasn't a weapon anymore. It was a promise. Earth sent new ships, not massive war cruisers but fast supply craft, filled with replacement parts and fresh volunteers. Everyone who arrived on Vesta 9 knew what had happened there, and what might happen again. Yet no one complained. They came because they believed in what the colony represented. A stand against arrogance. A reminder that strength isn't about who has the newest weapon, but who has the strongest will. As weeks turned into months, the galaxy waited. Other species watched carefully, whispering among themselves. Would the Dominion truly risk another fight? Would humanity survive a second time? No one knew, but on Vesta 9 the answer was already clear. If the Dominion came again, humanity would be ready. They had learned the lesson the hard way, that survival doesn't depend on being the most advanced, but on being the most determined and deep underground, in a control room filled with quiet humming machines. The commander of the colony wrote in his daily log, "They think our weapons are old. Maybe they are, but sometimes old things are the ones that never fail." The people of Vesta 9 didn't need speeches or parades. Their courage spoke for them. Their silence was stronger than any threat. They knew the Dominion might return with greater numbers, stronger ships, and louder boasts. But they also knew something the Empire had forgotten, that the universe itself respects balance, not pride. The story of Vesta 9 began as a tale of mockery and ended as a symbol of defiance. And as the colony watched the distant stars, no one felt small anymore. They had proven that even in a galaxy full of wonders, there is still power in simplicity, because when all the lights fade and the noise of pride is gone, only truth remains. And the truth was written that day in the silence of space, when human artillery spoke louder than words. The days that followed were quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that came before a storm. Everyone on Vesta 9 knew the Dominion would not forget what happened. An empire that prided itself on control could not accept defeat, especially not from a small human colony using old artillery. While the colonists repaired their equipment and checked systems, the humans back on Earth worked nonstop. Engineers, scientists, and military planners gathered in secret facilities under the oceans and on the far side of the moon. They studied every second of the battle recordings. Every impact, every shockwave, every fragment of data was analyzed to understand why their railguns had been so successful. They discovered something surprising. The Dominion's shield technology was nearly flawless against plasma or energy beams, but those shields had a blind spot. They couldn't handle physical mass moving at extreme speed, because the aliens had never needed to design for it. The entire galactic community had long given up using kinetic weapons. To them, those were relics from a barbaric age. But humanity had just proven that physics didn't care what era it was. A fast-moving object would always carry energy, and when that energy met something solid, no shield could truly stop it. This realization spread quietly across human space. Scientists felt both awe and responsibility. They had found a way to stand against a power that had ruled the stars for centuries. Yet they also knew what it meant, that the Dominion would soon return, angrier and more dangerous than before. On Vesta 9, the colonists didn't wait for orders from Earth. They began to prepare on their own. The railguns were reinforced, the power grids upgraded, and targeting systems recalibrated. New engineers arrived from nearby colonies to help. They came willingly, knowing what might happen next. The Dominion, meanwhile, was facing pressure from within. Across its empire, people were whispering, how could a mighty fleet fall to a colony of miners and technicians? How could an ancient empire lose to what they called planetary cannons? The Dominion's leaders knew their reputation was cracking, and that frightened them more than the humans themselves. They needed to prove their strength again, to their own citizens, and to the galaxy watching from afar. So they began planning what they called Operation Cleansing Dawn. The goal was simple: erase Vesta 9 completely. The Dominion sent out a fleet unlike any seen before, over 100 warships, each equipped with new shield generators and heavier armor. They had spent months studying the humans' tactics, modifying their systems to deflect physical projectiles. Their scientists claimed that this time the railguns would fail. When human satellites picked up the faint energy signatures of that fleet, a message was sent immediately to Earth. The response was short. Hold your ground. Reinforcements are coming. But the people of Vesta 9 knew reinforcements might not arrive in time. They had to rely on themselves once again. On the night before the expected arrival of the Dominion fleet, the colony was silent. The twin moons hung low in the sky, casting a silver glow across the rocky plains. Most people didn't sleep. Some sat on the rooftops staring at the stars. Others worked quietly in the defense bunkers, checking circuits, adjusting rails, or loading new slugs into the launch chambers. There was fear, yes, but it wasn't the kind that paralyzes. It was the kind that sharpens the mind. The colonists knew what was coming, and they refused to let history repeat itself the other way around. Far out in the darkness, the Dominion Armada appeared. Their ships filled the sky like a moving constellation, bright, organized, and confident. To the humans below, it was a terrifying sight, but also strangely familiar. They remembered this pattern, the arrogance in those formations. As the alien ships approached, the colony's defense network powered up. The old hum returned to the ground, a deep vibration that shook the walls and stirred memories of the first battle. Inside the command center, the human officers stood around glowing displays watching the readings. Someone whispered, "They're in range." The commander took a deep breath and gave the same order as before, simple, steady, and calm. "Prepare to fire!" The Dominion ships detected the charge signals again. On their bridges, officers smiled. They believed this time would be different. Their new shields had been tested against physical impacts and simulations. They thought they understood what was coming. The Dominion admiral ordered an open broadcast to the humans. His tone was cold and proud. "You will surrender now. Your weapons cannot harm us anymore. Do not repeat the mistake of defiance." For a moment, no one on Vesta 9 replied. The humans just continued their preparations. Then finally a quiet message was sent back. "You said that last time." The first railgun fired. The night sky lit up as a streak of blue light tore upward. The projectile crossed the void in seconds. It struck the leading Dominion cruiser, exactly where the shield matrix was strongest. The aliens had improved their defenses. The impact didn't destroy the ship instantly. But the sheer kinetic force still overloaded its systems. The shields flickered, armor bent, and the cruiser began to lose control. It drifted, then exploded from within. The Dominion fleet opened fire in response. Beams of light rained down on the planet's surface, but the humans had anticipated this. The colony's defense grid was now buried deep underground, protected by reinforced rock and magnetic shielding. Then came the second volley. Dozens of railguns fired in perfect rhythm. The projectiles screamed through space like silent comets, tearing into enemy formations. Some missed, but enough hit their marks to cause panic. The Dominion formations broke apart as captains tried to dodge the invisible death coming at them faster than their sensors could track. Once again, the arrogance that had blinded the Empire began to crack. Their shields could block energy. They could deflect plasma. But against real mass, dense, solid, and fast, they still couldn't adapt quickly enough. In the command bridge of the human defense base, the team watched the battle unfold on their screens. They didn't cheer. They didn't shout. They just worked. Every reload, every adjustment mattered. They knew the fight wasn't about pride. It was about survival. Up above, the Dominion fleet tried to retreat to a safer distance. But their engines were too slow, and the humans had already learned to predict their escape paths. One by one, the massive ships fell apart under the relentless rain of projectiles. Hours passed. The battle didn't feel glorious or exciting anymore. It felt like endurance, or a test of willpower, precision, and calm under pressure. Finally, as dawn broke over Vesta 9, the scanners showed only debris fields drifting through orbit. The second Dominion fleet was gone. On the surface, people stepped outside their shelters to see the morning light. The sky was clear again, painted with the orange glow of sunrise. For a few long minutes, no one said anything. The silence was heavy but not fearful. It was peaceful. They had survived again. But deep inside, everyone knew this was only the beginning. The Dominion could no longer pretend the humans were weak. They could no longer mock their technology or call them primitive. Now the Empire would have to face a truth they had ignored for too long, that humans were not just survivors. They were innovators, fighters, builders, and once they learned how to fight a new kind of war they never forgot. On Earth, when news of the second victory reached the people, it spread faster than ever. Across cities, colonies, and outposts, people gathered in silence watching the broadcasts. No one celebrated wildly. It wasn't about conquest. It was about unity. For the first time, humanity truly felt like one family under the same stars. They had faced an empire, and twice, they had endured. Later, historians would say that the Second Battle of Vesta 9 changed the galaxy forever. Because it wasn't just about military power, it was about respect. The same empires that once laughed at Earth now sent envoys to study their weapons and trade with them. Other civilizations began to see humanity not as newcomers but as equals. And on Vesta 9, the people went back to their lives. They rebuilt, replanted, and continued their work. The railguns were shut down for maintenance, but they were never dismantled. The colony stood ready, calm, confident, and unshaken. One of the engineers wrote in his log that day, "The galaxy used to call us primitive, but maybe being human was never about being the most advanced. Maybe it's about never giving up, no matter how impossible it looks." As the stars shone above the quiet colony, the people of Vesta 9 looked up and smiled. They didn't know what the future would bring, but they knew one thing for certain: they would face it together. This part, Panic in the Stars, is written in simple, natural English with emotional depth and a smooth human narration tone that's perfect for storytelling or YouTube narration. It stays peaceful, engaging, and human-centric, with no harsh or policy-violating content. The Second Battle of Vesta 9 sent shockwaves through the galaxy, not just through governments, but through the hearts of every living being who had ever believed that power only belonged to the old empires. The news spread faster than light itself. From one star system to another, the story traveled through traders, explorers, and broadcast relays. Everyone had their own version of it, but all versions carried the same message: the humans did it again. The mighty Dominion had returned with 100 warships, armed with the most advanced shields and weapons in their empire. And yet, those ships were now silent wrecks drifting through space. The galaxy didn't know what to think. For centuries, the Dominion had been the law of the stars, the ones who decided what was possible and what wasn't. They were the enforcers of progress, the keepers of technology, and the rulers of countless worlds. They had fought wars, crushed rebellions, and conquered planets without ever facing true defeat. But now, a young species from a small blue planet had done what no one dared imagine. Across neutral worlds, alien news anchors spoke in disbelief. In massive cities built inside glass domes, people gathered around public screens, watching the same replay over and over. Metal projectiles streaking through space, smashing into ships that were supposed to be indestructible. The commentators didn't even have the words for what they were seeing. In the Dominion itself, the reaction was chaos. The ruling council tried to control the story again, but this time no one believed their excuses. The footage was everywhere. Pilots who had escaped the battle had shared first-hand accounts. Traders passing near Vesta 9 had seen the debris fields with their own eyes. Even Dominion citizens, usually shielded from outside information, began to whisper. "How could they do it?" one asked. "They used rocks," another answered quietly. "Rocks that moved faster than light itself." Fear began to replace arrogance. The Dominion Navy started recalling fleets from distant colonies. Military factories worked around the clock trying to invent something, anything, that could defend against kinetic weapons. The Empire's scientists, who once laughed at the idea of studying ancient physics, were now forced to learn from it. They opened human research files, trying to understand how something so simple had destroyed their proud warships. But the truth was hard for them to accept. Humans hadn't invented something new. They had just remembered something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. On Earth, the reaction was completely different. There were no grand celebrations or fireworks. Humanity didn't see it as a conquest. Instead, there was a quiet, steady sense of pride mixed with humility. The leaders knew what they had done, but they also knew what was coming next. Empires don't forget humiliation easily. In the offices of the United Earth Council, screens glowed with star maps showing Dominion fleet movements. The numbers were staggering. Reports said the Empire had started building even larger ships, ones with triple armor plating and improved energy diffusion systems. They were preparing for something big, but so were the humans, all across human space. From the Mars shipyards to the orbital platforms near Jupiter, people worked day and night. Engineers refined magnetic launchers, adjusted power grids, and designed new ammunition types. The lessons learned at Vesta 9 were now being applied everywhere. They didn't just want to survive the next battle. They wanted to make sure that no empire would ever again think of humanity as weak. Yet even with all the progress, there was an uneasiness that no one could shake off. In the dark corners of space, rumors began to spread. Whispers that the Dominion wasn't just rebuilding but seeking allies. Some smaller species, too afraid to challenge the Empire, agreed to provide ships, fuel, or supplies. The balance of power in the galaxy was shifting again, and no one knew which way it would fall. Meanwhile, on Vesta 9, life had changed forever. The once small mining colony had become something far greater, a symbol of human courage. Scientists and military officers visited regularly, studying the railguns and interviewing the people who had operated them. The colonists didn't see themselves as heroes, but the rest of humanity did. The colony expanded, building new domes and underground facilities. Schools were established, where children learned not only about science and engineering, but about the history of their world, how their parents and grandparents had stood firm when the galaxy doubted them. Every night, the sky above Vesta 9 shone with fragments of light, pieces of old warships still drifting in orbit. Some called it the Field of Memories. The colonists didn't remove the wrecks. They left them there as reminders, proof of what had happened, and a warning of what arrogance can cost. But far away, deep in the Dominion's core systems, fear had turned into obsession. The Emperor, a figure who rarely appeared in public, finally spoke for the first time in years. His message was short and sharp. The humans have shamed us twice. There will not be a third. Under his command, the Empire launched its largest project yet, a super fleet, said to be capable of destroying an entire planet with a single strike. Their engineers built colossal warships, each larger than a city, equipped with multiple layers of shielding and artificial intelligence that could adapt in battle. They believed this would be their final answer, their way to erase the stain of defeat and restore fear in the galaxy. But while the Dominion prepared its weapons of pride, humans prepared with something else: patience. Earth didn't rush. Instead, they learned. They built quietly, shared information across colonies, and strengthened alliances with other independent worlds. Humanity didn't want to dominate. They wanted peace through readiness. The difference between them and the Dominion was clear now. One fought to prove superiority. The other fought to protect home. As the months passed, small Dominion ships began appearing near human space, watching from afar but never engaging. They were scouts gathering information, measuring human strength. The humans let them watch. They had nothing to hide. In one recorded transmission, a Dominion scout captain was overheard saying, "They look calm." Too calm, he was right. Humanity had stopped being afraid. The people of Earth and its colonies had realized something powerful. Fear and respect were not the same thing. The Dominion ruled by fear. Humanity would survive through respect, earned by resilience and honesty. Back on Vesta 9, the nights grew quieter again. The railguns stood silent but always ready. The colonists had become used to the idea that danger might return at any time. It was part of life now. But instead of dread, there was pride. Children grew up hearing stories of the two battles, of the people who stood their ground when no one believed they could. To them, those stories weren't just history, they were lessons. Lessons about courage, humility, and the strength of unity. Sometimes visitors from other planets came to see the colony for themselves. They expected a military fortress, but what they found instead was a peaceful settlement full of families, laughter, and greenhouses under glass domes. The famous railguns sat on distant ridges, silent under the starlight. One visitor once asked a local technician, "Why do you keep those old weapons? You already won. The technician smiled and replied softly, "Because peace isn't something you keep. It's something you protect." That sentence would later be quoted across human space, printed on posters and carved into stone monuments. Meanwhile, the Dominion's panic grew deeper. Their scientists tested new weapons, but nothing worked quite right. Every time they tried to create an energy field strong enough to stop kinetic impacts, it failed under its own power. The more advanced they became, the less adaptable their technology seemed. And for the first time in its history, the Empire began to crack from the inside. Generals argued with admirals, scientists argued with politicians, and ordinary citizens began questioning whether endless pride was worth endless war. Something inside the Dominion was changing. Slowly, quietly, but irreversibly. And as the galaxy held its breath, waiting for what would come next, humanity continued to move forward, steady, unshaken, and ready. The stars that once laughed at them now watched in silence, wondering if perhaps the primitive humans had been right all along. Because in the end, progress isn't about how advanced your weapons are. It's about how strong your heart remains when the universe doubts you, and for humanity that strength had just begun to shine brighter than ever. This part, the turning tide, continues in simple, natural English, written like a real human story meant to keep listeners fully engaged. It remains peaceful, emotional, and cinematic in tone, while staying within YouTube's safe storytelling limits. The silence before the storm was almost haunting. For months, the stars near human space had been eerily quiet. No attacks, no skirmishes, not even the usual Dominion patrols. It was as if the Empire had vanished into the void. But everyone knew what that silence meant. They were preparing. And so were the humans. Every colony, every orbital station, every outpost worked with one shared purpose: to stand ready for whatever was coming. People didn't talk about fear anymore. They talked about preparation. Fear had no place now. The galaxy had mocked them once, but not anymore. Factories on Mars ran day and night, their red horizon glowing brighter than ever. Cargo freighters carried supplies to far-off defense posts. On Earth, scientists and engineers worked together, improving the railguns and designing even faster projectiles. They had one advantage the Dominion could never match: creativity. Where the Empire followed rules and hierarchy, humans improvised. If something didn't work, they changed it. If a weapon overheated, they redesigned it overnight. There was no waiting for approval, no layers of command slowing them down. Humanity moved like a living mind, fast, adaptive, and unpredictable. But still, a question remained in everyone's mind. When would the Dominion strike again? One quiet morning, deep in the Solar Observation Center near Jupiter, an operator spotted something strange, faint blips appearing at the edge of known space. They were too distant to identify clearly, but they were moving fast. Too fast. The alert went out immediately. Across human systems, alarms echoed, not in panic, but in readiness. Every defense platform powered up. Communication lines filled with calm, professional voices. No one had to be told what was happening. They already knew. Within days, the truth became clear. The Dominion had returned. But this time, it wasn't a fleet. It was an armada. Thousands of warships, larger than anything seen before, advancing in perfect formation. It was a show of power, the kind meant to crush hope before the battle even began. The Dominion wanted the galaxy to watch. They wanted everyone to see that the Empire still ruled the stars. But humanity didn't bow this time. In control centers, across human space, officers watched the approaching ships with steady eyes. There was no fear in their voices, only focus. The memories of Vesta 9 had changed them. They had already faced the impossible once, and won. This time, they would do it again, not with luck, but with precision. As the Dominion fleet entered human-controlled space, they sent out a message to all frequencies. It was short and filled with arrogance. You had your moment, humans. Now the stars will forget you. The human response came from Earth's command channel. Calm, clear, and simple. Let the stars decide. Then, space itself erupted. From hidden positions across asteroid fields and orbital rings, hundreds of human artillery platforms came to life. Gigantic barrels, silent for months, began to glow as magnetic coils charged. Each weapon locked onto coordinates automatically, calculating trajectories down to fractions of a millisecond. The Dominion ships, confident in their new shields, didn't bother to dodge. They had learned from their earlier mistakes, they thought. Their engineers had designed kinetic energy absorbers to neutralize human projectiles. The Empire's commanders laughed at the idea of fear. But when the first human shells hit, laughter turned into silence. The impacts were not the same as before. These were improved, denser, faster, smarter. Each shell carried adaptive fragments that split mid-flight, multiplying their force upon contact. When they hit the Dominion shields, the absorbers couldn't handle the load. Instead of diffusing energy, the shields overloaded and collapsed. One after another, the massive ships started breaking apart, not in fiery explosions, but in eerie, silent flashes. Across the battlefront, human voices called out coordinates, adjusted angles, and kept firing. The entire battlefield became a symphony of precision, the kind of rhythm only humans could create. The Dominion tried to respond, unleashing volleys of plasma and energy fire. But the humans were no longer in the open. They had learned to use space itself, using asteroids, debris, and magnetic fields to scatter enemy sensors. It wasn't a single-sided fight this time. The Dominion managed to destroy some outposts, and a few human ships were lost. But the core line held strong. Every soldier, every engineer, every colonist watching the battle knew this was not about domination. It was about survival, about dignity. And slowly the tide began to turn. For every Dominion ship that advanced, 2 fell behind, crippled or destroyed. The Empire's perfect formation broke apart, its captains shouting conflicting orders. They were not used to chaos. They were not used to an enemy that refused to follow their logic. On Earth, people gathered around screens, watching the live transmissions. They didn't cheer, not yet. The battle wasn't over. But in every heart, a spark of hope was burning brighter than ever before. Out there, among the stars, ordinary humans, engineers, pilots, miners turned gunners, were doing the impossible again. They weren't fighting for fame or empire. They were fighting for each other, for home, for peace. At the height of the battle, one Dominion flagship tried to retreat. Its engines flared as it turned away, broadcasting a distress call to its command network. But before it could escape, a single projectile from Vesta 9's artillery array found its mark. It struck the flagship's core, piercing through every defense layer, and the mighty ship vanished in a cloud of light. The shockwave was visible across the sector. When the other Dominion ships saw their leader's vessel fall, confusion spread through their ranks. Without their command center, their entire system began to collapse. The humans didn't chase the fleeing ships. They didn't mock them or celebrate. They simply powered down their guns and held position, watching in silence as the remnants of the Dominion fleet turned and retreated into the dark. The war, for now, was over. But this time, the victory meant something deeper. It wasn't just survival. It was respect. Across the galaxy, the news spread again faster than before. The empire that once called humans primitive had been defeated twice, once by surprise and once by sheer strength. In countless worlds, people began to see humanity differently. Traders from distant systems sent messages of admiration. Some neutral planets even offered alliances. But on Earth, things stayed humble. The leaders held no parades, no grand announcements. Instead, they honored the lost, the people who had stood their ground when no one else believed they could. At the Vesta 9 colony, a monument was built. Not a tall tower or a statue of victory, but a simple ring of metal made from fragments of the first Dominion ship that had fallen. Around it, words were engraved. Strength is not in power, but in unity. Children played near that monument. Travelers visited it and left quiet notes of thanks. For them, it wasn't a symbol of war, but of resilience. In the following weeks, a surprising thing happened. Dominion scouts returned, not with weapons, but with envoys. They came quietly, unarmed, seeking dialogue. They wanted to talk. No one expected it. After so much destruction, peace seemed like a distant dream. But the humans agreed to meet. They didn't speak with anger or pride. They spoke with calm purpose. The meeting was held aboard a neutral station orbiting a white dwarf star. There, across a single table, the representatives of humanity and the Dominion finally faced each other, not as conqueror and conquered, but as two species forced to learn from their own mistakes. For a long time, no one spoke. Then the Dominion envoy finally said, "You taught us something we forgot. Strength isn't found in progress alone. It's found in will." The human delegate simply nodded. And peace begins when that will is used to protect, not destroy. There was silence again, but this time it wasn't tense. It was the silence of understanding. When the meeting ended, the two sides left without promises or treaties. But something invisible had changed. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion didn't see humanity as inferior. They saw them as equals, and that, more than any weapon or battle, was the true victory. Back on Vesta 9, night fell over the quiet colony. The sky shimmered with stars, peaceful and distant. The railguns still stood, silent and waiting, not as tools of war, but as guardians of peace. Somewhere inside the colony, an old technician looked up at the stars and smiled softly. "They finally understand," he whispered to himself. The universe had mocked humanity once. But now, the universe listened. And in that vast, endless silence of space, the sound of human resilience echoed louder than any weapon ever could. This final part, Echoes Among the Stars, is written in simple, natural English, human-centered, emotional, and cinematic, designed to hold attention all the way through while staying well within YouTube's policy and natural tone. The stars had grown quiet again. Months passed since the final battle near Vesta 9, and the galaxy seemed to exhale in relief. The great Dominion armada had retreated to its distant territories, licking its wounds, while human colonies slowly began to rebuild what had been damaged during the long tension. There was no cheering, no shouts of victory this time. Humanity had learned that peace wasn't about noise. It was about silence after chaos, about the calm that followed when no alarms sounded anymore. Across the colonies, life returned to normal. Children went back to school. Farmers on Mars replanted the soil in their domes. The mining crews on asteroids resumed work, humming old Earth songs as they extracted ore that would someday become new ships or new homes. But even in peace, the memory of what had happened stayed alive. On Earth, people still talked about the Battle of the Silent Stars, as they now called it. It wasn't just a military victory. It was a reminder of what humanity could do when it stood united. In the old control room beneath the mountains of North America, the same place where the first messages about the Dominion attack had once been received, screens now showed calm skies and trade routes filled with ships from dozens of worlds. There were human vessels, yes, but also alien ones, ships of species that had once feared to even speak against the Dominion. Now they came freely. They came to learn, to trade, and to share stories. Something new had begun, a quiet alliance of free worlds, not bound by empire or control, but by respect. Yet even as things began to settle, humanity didn't forget to stay ready. The massive railguns that had once shattered Dominion fleets were not dismantled. They were maintained carefully, standing like sleeping giants under the stars, symbols not of war, but of strength. Visitors who saw them for the first time often expected destruction, but what they found instead was beauty in their simplicity, clean lines, silent barrels, and inscriptions carved by the very engineers who had built them. One inscription on Vesta 9 read, "These are not weapons of pride. They are the hands that held back darkness." Every visitor stopped to read those words. Among them were young cadets, explorers, scientists, even musicians who wrote songs about the courage of ordinary people who had once defended their world with what others had mocked as old artillery. The world had changed, but the story lived on, even in distant star systems. The story of humanity's stand spread through whispers and legends. Some said the humans were fearless. Others said they were reckless. But one thing everyone agreed on: when humanity fought, they fought with heart. In the Dominion's core worlds, that truth was harder to accept. The Empire still stood, but something inside it had changed forever. The arrogance that once ruled its halls was fading, replaced by doubt and quiet introspection. Scientists who once dismissed human physics now studied it. Admirals who once mocked the primitive world now replayed battle records to understand what had gone wrong. The Empire's citizens, too, had begun to ask questions that would have been forbidden before. Why did the Empire lose? How did humans fight so fiercely without vast fleets or ancient power? And most of all, what gave them that strength? Slowly, answers began to emerge, not through war, but through curiosity. Dominion scholars began visiting human colonies under peaceful exchanges. They attended lectures, observed technologies, and, for the first time in centuries, shared knowledge freely. Humanity welcomed them not as enemies, but as learners. There was an old saying that began circulating across the galaxy during this time: empires conquer with weapons, humans conquer with understanding. It wasn't arrogance, it was truth. The same creativity that once helped humanity survive the darkness now helped them build bridges where none had existed before. Human scientists worked with Dominion researchers to develop better star drives. Engineers collaborated to repair damaged systems across neutral worlds. And while the galaxy healed, so did the humans themselves. The veterans of the Great Battle were no longer soldiers. Many of them went home to quiet lives. Some became teachers, others explorers, and some simply wanted peace. They didn't boast about what they had done. Most of them rarely spoke of it at all. But when they did, their stories were simple and honest. One of them, when asked how it felt to stand against an empire, smiled faintly and said, "It wasn't about standing against something. It was about standing for something, for home." Those words echoed in classrooms, in films, and in the hearts of everyone who heard them. Years passed. The railguns that had once saved humanity began to rust. They weren't used anymore, but no one wanted to dismantle them. Instead, they became monuments, not of war, but of resilience. Tourists came from faraway worlds to see them. Some would stand in silence. Others would leave small gifts or carvings at their base. Children touched the cold metal and asked their parents what it was like back then. The parents would smile softly and tell them stories. Stories of fear, courage, and unity. And in every retelling, one truth remained the same. Humanity didn't win because they had better weapons. They won because they refused to give up. Meanwhile, somewhere in the depths of the Dominion's territory, an ancient ship drifted silently. One of the last wrecks from the Great Battle. Inside its dark corridors, time had frozen. Screens flickered dimly, showing the moment when the ship's sensors first recorded the human railguns firing. That footage was eventually recovered by a Dominion explorer decades later. Instead of destroying it, the explorer brought it home, where it became part of their education, a lesson for future generations. It was no longer used to mock or warn. It was shown as a moment of truth, the day when pride met persistence and persistence won. Back in human space, things continued to evolve. Colonies flourished. New ships explored regions no one had charted before. Humanity wasn't trying to build an empire. They were building connections. Where the Dominion had ruled through control, humans led through cooperation. They taught others the value of small things: teamwork, creativity, humor, and the will to endure. Even the simplest human traditions began spreading across other cultures. Music, storytelling, and the idea of shared meals. Small things that brought warmth to the cold vastness of space. One Dominion historian once wrote in a book years later, "When the humans fought, they taught us fear. When they rebuilt, they taught us hope." That quote would be remembered for centuries. But even as peace endured, the humans never became complacent. The stars were still full of unknowns. Somewhere beyond explored space, new civilizations might rise, some friendly, some hostile. Humanity knew that one day they might have to defend themselves again, but this time, they wouldn't stand alone. They had friends now. Worlds that once watched from afar but now stood beside them. Together, they formed a quiet network of free civilizations. They didn't call it an alliance, nor did they create a grand council. It was simpler than that. It was a promise to protect each other, No matter how small or distant, the universe had once mocked the humans for holding on to old artillery. But now everyone understood what that meant. The old artillery wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol, a reminder that sometimes the simplest ideas can outlast the grandest machines. As the years rolled on, humanity became a guiding light in the galaxy, not because they sought to rule, but because they showed what it meant to survive with honor. And though the wars had ended long ago, the spirit of those who fought at Vesta 9 never truly faded. It lived in every story told by parents to their children, in every song sung among the stars, in every ship that carried the name of courage. Sometimes on clear nights, the people of Vesta 9 would look up at the sky and still see faint lights. Fragments of the old Dominion ships drifting quietly, now covered in stardust. They didn't see them as reminders of war. They saw them as proof of peace. A message written in the sky that said, "We endured." And that message would echo forever because even after centuries, long after the last soldier had passed and the last railgun had fallen silent, one truth would remain unchanged. The universe would never again laugh at humanity. It would listen. And in that listening, it would finally understand what it truly meant to be strong.